I'm Danielle, and I'm 34 years old. Christmas Eve was supposed to be the night my family found out I had saved the company $4.5 million in tax audits. Instead, it turned into the night my own father looked me straight in the eye across the dinner table and erased me from his life with one sentence. The Drake Hotel ballroom was full of polished silverware, expensive wine, and fake smiles. I waited until everyone had taken a bite of prime rib, set my fork down, and prepared to speak. But he beat me to it. My father leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight, his eyes cold in a way I'd never seen before. He didn't ask how the audit went. He didn't ask if I was tired. He just said a few quiet, careful words about my mental health that I won't repeat here. Then added, "You are a liability. Danielle, you are stepping down tonight." That was it. 10 years of doing everything right, wiped out between the salad and dessert. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I reached under my chair, took the tablet I used to run his entire empire, and set it in the middle of the table. Then I pushed back my chair, wished everyone a Merry Christmas, and walked out of that ballroom. Before I tell you what he said next, and what happened when the screens went black, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I want to see how far this story travels. The heavy oak doors swung shut behind me, cutting off the murmur of 500 wealthy guests. Silence. It was freezing in the hallway, the kind of Chicago winter chill that seeps through silk and settles in your bones. But I didn't feel it. I felt clarity. For the last decade, I haven't just been Richard's daughter. I have been the lead systems architect who built his entire logistics empire from the code up. He thought he was the king because he sat in the chair. He never realized I was the one who built the throne. I didn't call a taxi. Not yet. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my personal phone. It was the master key. Richard thought he had fired me. He thought he could publicly shame me to cover his own embezzlement. But he forgot one crucial detail. He didn't own the system. I did. I opened the administrative application. The interface glowed soft blue in the dim light of the corridor. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about the family dinners or the birthdays, or the years of trying to earn his approval. I typed 2 words into the command line. Revoke all. I pressed enter. Inside the ballroom, the effect was instant. Through the glass panels of the double doors, I watched the chaos unfold like a silent film. Richard was standing on the podium, mouth open, hand raised to cue his charity video. The massive LED screen behind him didn't play the video. It turned pitch black. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, visible even through the glass. Then, a second later, the screen flared to life again. But this time it wasn't the company logo. It was a single, flashing red banner. Unauthorized user. System lockdown. The microphone let out a high-pitched screech, and died. The stage lights cut out, plunging the podium into darkness. The emergency lights flickered on, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. I saw Courtney rushing to the control table, tapping frantically on a keyboard that I knew was now nothing more than a plastic paperweight. Richard was slamming his hand against the dead microphone, his face turning a shade of purple I could see even from 50 feet away. The donors were standing up, whispering, checking their phones. But their phones wouldn't work either. Not on the company network. I had killed that too. It took 30 seconds to dismantle what took him 40 years to build. I watched for another moment, letting the image burn into my memory. The panic, the confusion, the absolute lack of control. For the first time in my life, I wasn't rushing to fix it. I was the one who broke it. A cold smile touched my lips. I turned my back on the chaos, adjusted my coat against the draft, and walked toward the revolving doors at the end of the hall. I thought I had taught them a lesson. I thought I had won. I didn't know I was walking straight into a cage. I reached for the brass handle of the revolving door. I could feel the cold draft coming through the seal, the promise of fresh air and freedom. But the door didn't move. A hand, heavy and gloved, slammed against the glass from the outside, locking the mechanism in place. I stepped back, confused, only to find my path blocked by 2 men in dark suits. They weren't hotel staff. I recognized the insignia on their lapels. BlackRock Security, my father's private contractors. They weren't here to escort me out. They were here to keep me in. "Miss Danielle," the taller one said. His voice wasn't a request. "You aren't leaving." I opened my mouth to threaten them with a lawsuit for unlawful imprisonment, but Richard's voice cut through the air like a whip. "You think you can just walk away after what you did?" He was marching across the lobby, his face flushed, veins bulging in his neck, but his eyes were terrifyingly clear. Courtney was right behind him, holding her phone up, the red recording light blinking like a sniper's scope. "I revoked my access to my own work," I said, keeping my voice level despite the adrenaline spiking in my blood. "That's not a crime, Richard. It's a resignation. It's corporate sabotage," he hissed. stepping into my personal space until I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. It's cyber terrorism. You just shut down a global network. You cost us millions in seconds. And you're going to stay right here until the authorities arrive to drag you out in cuffs. He didn't wait for me to argue. He nodded to the guards. One of them grabbed my upper arm, hard enough to bruise, and steered me away from the exit. They forced me into a small, glass-walled conference room off the main lobby. It wasn't a room. It was a fishbowl. Guests were starting to filter out of the ballroom, whispering, pointing. Richard wanted a spectacle. He wanted witnesses. He slammed the door shut and stood guard outside, crossing his arms. Smile for the camera. Traitor. Courtney sneered, shoving her phone lens inches from my face through the open door before the guard blocked the entrance. Tell the world how you destroyed Dad's company because you were jealous. Tell them you're crazy. I looked at Richard through the glass. He was adjusting his cufflinks, watching me with a look of predatory satisfaction. And that's when the pieces clicked into place. The sudden promotion to Chief Operations Officer 6 months ago, the way he distanced himself from the financials. The sudden concern about my stress levels in email chains. He wasn't just mad. He was relieved. Psychologists call it the glass cliff. When a company is failing, men in power often promote a woman to the highest position so she can take the blame when the inevitable crash happens. Richard knew the $4.5 million was gone. He knew the audit was coming. He needed a scapegoat. He needed someone to hold the smoking gun. By shutting down the system, I hadn't just angered him. I had played right into his narrative. He could blame the missing money on my sabotage. He could claim the data loss hid his theft. I was trapped in a glass box, stripped of my coat, my keys confiscated by the guard at the door. Richard leaned against the glass, mouthing the word prison at me. He thought he had me cornered. He thought I was the rat in the trap. He didn't realize that by locking me in here, he had just locked himself in with the only person who knew where the bodies were buried. The sound of Richard shouting through the glass was muffled, like he was underwater. He was pacing back and forth in front of the door, gesturing wildly to the security guards, probably telling them I was a flight risk, a criminal, a lunatic. Courtney was still filming. Her phone pressed against the pane, capturing every second of my imprisonment for her followers. She wanted a breakdown. She wanted tears. She wanted the viral moment of the crazy sister losing her mind. I sat perfectly still at the mahogany conference table, my hands folded on the cold stone surface, watching them perform. They didn't know I wasn't really in the room with them. I was 10 years in the past. I was 24 years old, sitting in the unheated back office of Richard's first warehouse. It was Christmas Eve then, too. The boiler had broken, and Richard had refused to pay the emergency rate to fix it. Put on a coat, Danielle, he had said. We're a startup. We sacrifice. I typed code for 14 hours straight, in fingerless gloves, my breath clouding in the air, building the dispatch algorithm that would eventually save him $200,000 a year in fuel costs. He didn't pay me overtime. He didn't even say thank you. He brought me a lukewarm coffee from the gas station and told me I was building my legacy. I remembered 5 years ago, when I asked for a raise to match the market rate for a senior architect. I was making 40% less than the industry standard. Richard had laughed, a booming, jovial sound that made me feel small. It's all one pot, honey, he had said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. Why do you need a salary when you're going to inherit the kingdom? I believed him. I went back to my desk and worked another 80-hour week while he bought a 60-foot yacht and named it the Courtney. I remembered the day I found the first hole in the books. 7 years ago, a small discrepancy in the vendor payouts. When I brought it to him, trembling, thinking someone was stealing from us, he didn't call the police. He patted my cheek. Don't worry your pretty little head about the numbers, Danny. You just keep the trucks running. Leave the business to the adults. He wasn't protecting me. He was hiding. He wasn't just a bad father. He was a thief who had been robbing his own company blind. And he had used my loyalty as the cover. He thought my silence was submission. He thought my hard work was stupidity. He didn't realize that by forcing me to build the system from scratch, by making me the only one who understood the code, he hadn't built a legacy. He had built a bomb. And he had handed me the detonator. I looked down at my phone on the table. The screen was dim, but I could see the countdown timer running in the background. 45 minutes. Richard was still yelling outside, his face twisted in ugly triumph. He thought he had won because he had locked me in a room. He thought he was the predator. He didn't understand that he was just a ghost in the machine, a glitch I had finally decided to patch out. They laughed at me back then for working through the holidays. They called me boring. They called me a grind. They didn't know that every line of code I wrote was a bar in the cage I was building for them. I checked the time. The legal team would be here in 3 minutes. Richard thought he was keeping me here to face justice. He had no idea he was the one awaiting sentencing. The door to the conference room clicked open. It wasn't the police. It was Jessica, the company's head of legal. She walked in with the click-clack of expensive heels on marble, carrying a single sheet of paper like it was a peace treaty. She didn't sit down. She slid the document across the table toward me. It was an admission of guilt. It stated that due to a mental health crisis, I had accidentally triggered a system failure, and that I would immediately restore access in exchange for the company declining to press criminal charges. "Sign it," she said, her voice bored. "Professional. Save yourself the prison time, Danielle. Richard is willing to be generous. He just wants his company back." I picked up the paper. I read the legal jargon, the non-disclosure clauses, the trap hidden in the fine print. Then I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the dry, sharp sound of a woman who knows exactly how the magic trick works. I crumpled the paper into a ball and dropped it on the floor. "I don't think you understand the situation, Jessica," I said, reaching into my own bag. "I didn't bring a lawyer. I brought receipts." I pulled out a stack of tax forms. The edges worn. The paper yellowed with age. I fanned them out on the table. 10 years of form, 1,099 seconds. Jessica frowned, picking up the top one. "What is this?" "It's proof," I said. "For 10 years, Richard refused to hire me as a W-2 employee. He didn't want to pay the payroll taxes. He didn't want to cover my health insurance. He told me it was better this way. That I was an independent contractor. A consultant. He thought he was being smart. He thought he was saving 7% on the bottom line." I leaned toward Jessica. "You know copyright law," I said. "Work for hire only applies to employees. I'm not one. I'm a vendor. And since Richard never paid to draft an assignment contract, every line of code, every database, every system I built, belongs to me." Jessica blanched. She understood immediately. "Richard never bought the rights," I continued. "He was too cheap. So the system he runs his company on? Mine. And as of 20 minutes ago, I revoked his license for non-payment." The room went silent. Richard appeared in the doorway. "Listening. Tell him," I said. "If he sues, I counter-sue for infringement. He doesn't own a logistics company anymore. Just trucks with no destination." The power shifted until Richard lunged. He shoved Jessica, grabbed my phone, and smashed it against the marble floor. "No phone, no code, no leverage," he shouted. Security hauled me out into the freezing alley, silk dress and bare skin in 10 below wind. He thought he'd beaten me. But he didn't know the truth. The phone wasn't the trigger. Just the heartbeat. When it stopped, the system assumed I'd been neutralized and executed the upload. Inside, the LED wall glared white. Protocol Omega activated. IRS criminal investigation. 100% complete. 500 phones buzzed. The secret books hit every donor and partner inbox. The room turned. Investors walked out. Reporters streamed the chaos. Then came sirens. FBI agents stormed the ballroom and cuffed him while I watched from the snow. The empire he built on my work collapsed in minutes. An agent found me outside, wrapped me in her coat, and confirmed what I already knew. I was listed as the whistleblower. Later, riding to the airport, I checked the IRS notification. 15 to 30% of the recovered $4.5 million. More than he ever paid me. Enough to start over. I deleted the archive of my past and watched the sun rise over Chicago, finally free.